Hey everyone, welcome to episode 4. Today we have quite a bit of ground to cover. We're going to talk about parenting and unparenting for managing groups of objects in your scene. We're also going to talk about duplicating, combining, and separating objects as separate objects, and also extracting shapes from existing objects, which leads to the topic of origin points, pivot points, 3D cursor, and why that's relevant in the context of manipulating objects. By the time we are done with this episode, you'll have a more in-depth understanding of how these things are interconnected. So let's get started. So we have our scene from last episode, and let's only focus on parenting and unparenting for now. So why don't we go ahead and hide our chairs, or just one chair. Let's hide the floor. You have a glowing object and you have other unglowing objects. Your glowing object with the yellow outline on it, that's your active object, and anything else is your unactive objects, but they are selected. You can have multiple objects that are inactive but are selected. You can only have a single active object. That's the object that you selected last. With that in mind, we can use this mechanic in Blender to tell the software to either pivot along the active object or parent to the active object or transfer attributes from the active object to inactive objects. This is why that's significant. My intention is to parent the table legs and the boxes to the flat surface of the table. So the hotkey is Ctrl-P to parent. We will use keep transform, the second option, object keep transform. Now, as you can see, there are some lines connecting the origin points of each table leg onto the origin point of the table. This just shows that these are children objects, and that's the parent object. Now, the children object will follow the scale, the rotation, and the location of the parent object. At the same time, you can move the children object individually. Like you want to move this here, and you want to move that here, and levitate this box a little bit. It doesn't change other children objects, and if you still want to change the parent object, everything else will follow. Ctrl-Z to undo all that. To unparent your object, you can choose to do it two separate ways. The first way to do it is to select your parent object first. You can tell just by the dotted lines over here. If you think that's a little redundant, you can uncheck the relationship lines. That's what they are. Select child. Now, this will select all of your child objects. You can choose to add this to your favorites. So right-click, add to favorites, and Q is your favorite menu. For me, I use this a lot, and I recommend you add this to your favorites. Select the parent first, you open up your quick favorites, and you select children, Alt-P, to separate or clear parent. I usually use clear parent and keep transformation. The relationship lines are gone, and if I move my tabletop, everything else does not follow. Let's talk about combining and separating individual objects. Ctrl-J to join all these together. As you can see, they are one object now, quote unquote. To separate it, you can go into edit mode with tab. When you hover your mouse over an object, L to select everything that's linked. As long as you haven't used the Boolean join operation, you can still separate individual objects, even when you combine them with Ctrl-J. If I just want to separate these few objects, P, and separate by selection, now we still have a few objects that are combined together. If you have a lot of these at once, and you just want to separate them by loose parts, there's an option for that. A to select everything, P to separate, and now you separate by loose parts. Now they're automatically separated. Tap to go back into object mode, and let's see what we've done. Now this cube is separate, this table is separate, and this portion is separate since we separated by loose parts. And here we have two table legs and a box joint together because we separated those as one object, and now Blender thinks that, hey, these three are together. To separate them again, tab to go into edit mode, A to select everything, P to separate by loose parts. Now everything is all scattered, and if you wish to combine your objects again, select the objects you wish to combine, Ctrl-J, join them together. Now that's one. These are two separate objects. You select these, Ctrl-J. Have you noticed how these are pivoting differently? Remember when we joined our objects together, our inactive objects are inheriting the origin point location of our active object, and in this case is the tabletop. If you wish to return your object origin back to the center of your object, there is a few options to do that. Object, set origin, origin to geometry, meaning that it will snap the origin back to the center of the geometry. I recommend favoriting this particular option since you will be using it a lot. So Q to open your quick favorite menu, origin to geometry. You may ask now, what if I want to snap my origin point onto somewhere specific? Well, you can. This is where your 3D cursor comes in. Your 3D cursor tells Blender where exactly you want things to happen. They could be a location where you will bring in a new object. It can be a location where you want things to pivot. And it could also be a location where you want to set your new origin point. Do you notice the candy cane colored circle in the middle of the screen right here? That's your 3D cursor. I'm going to snap the 3D cursor to the bottom of this table leg. I am going into edit mode and I selected the surface underneath the table leg. Shift S to open up your 3D cursor menu. Select cursor to selected, or you can press the hotkey 2. Now your cursor is snapped to, now your 3D cursor is snapped to your desired location. Go back to object mode. You can now set your origin to 3D cursor. I highly recommend favoriting this as well, since you will be using it a lot. And to repeat the same process to this other leg, I would do the same. Shift S, 3D cursor menu, cursor to selected, or hotkey 2. Go back to object mode, and now origin to 3D cursor. So we returned the origin back to the underside of the table leg. The only reason to do this is to control how you want things to pivot. If you want the door to open one way, I would snap the 3D cursor to the selected face. Now I will move the origin to the 3D cursor, and when I rotate the door on the Z axis, it will swing open with the origin as your pivot point. Let's dabble in pivot points just for a little bit so you know that there are other options out there. Earlier, our pivot point was bounding box center, meaning at the center of all your objects. If you just want each individual object to spin around its own individual origins. So let's look at what happens when you select that. They're all rotating on their own individual origins. And if you want everything to spin around the 3D cursor, which is now over here, as you can see, now everything is spinning around the 3D cursor. If you want everything to swing around an active element, meaning your active object, now they're all swinging around the active object. Medium point is very similar to bounding box center. I just need to let you know that there are options out there for rotating objects. With a better understanding of origin and pivot points, we can simply go into our scene and select any face, vertice, or edge and duplicate it within edit mode. Change this however we like. I'm going to give it some volume. Once I'm satisfied, I can simply select linked with L, separate this object, go back to object mode, select this new object that we created, and recenter the object's origin point back to its geometry. That's how you extract geometry from existing objects without bringing in a completely new object. We can duplicate this asset across 4 sides of the table. So now that we have 2 planks, we would like to replicate this on the other 2 sides of the table. I'm going to duplicate this, right click to allow the planks to stay in their default position, rotate this 90 degrees. However, we are on the individual origin pivot point, and this will not serve us. So let's undo that and select bounding box center. In this case, it rotates everything within the center of both origin points. Now we have a perfectly good table. Next episode, we will talk about something very exciting, which is sculpture mode. Sculpture mode allows us to make very precise and organic changes to our geometry. This allows us to carve intricate patterns and details onto our geometry. And we can go as detailed as we like, given that our computer can handle it. This is where we really unleash the power of Blender. We're combining our modeling tools and our sculpting tools. If we combine these 2 tools together, we can model and recreate 99% of everything we see in the world. Stay tuned.